Thank you for joining Little Red Dress Project's tutorial on how to bead a little red dress. Please find a printable pattern online at our website at littlereddressproject.ca. Here is a list of supplies that you will need in order to complete this project. Alright, we're going to start with our size 11 red delica beads and pour a few of them out onto our mat here. We don't need too many, you can add more if you need some more later. That's a good amount right there. And then we're going to take our secondary color. I've chosen a lilac purple. So we're going to pour a few of those out onto the mat as well. You definitely don't need as much of the accent color as you do red, so just a few there. And then you can go ahead and thread your needle. Alright, so when we were doing our pin, we will be starting on the 2 red rows right below the belt. So we were going to be starting with a zigzag stitch. I'll show you how to do that in a moment, but it's those 2 rows right under the belt where we are going to be starting. Alright, so we are going to be picking up 2 and then 3 in total of the delicas on your beading needle and your fire line. And I'm going to try and stay in camera as much as I can here, but you're going to take your beads and you're going to slide them down your thread all the way until you have about an inch to an inch and a half tail on the end. Alright, so I'll show you here that I've got my delica beads and I've got a tail at the end of my fire line thread here. And how we start this zigzag stitch is we're going to make a triangle with our delicas. And how we do that is you're going to take your beading needle and you're going to go back in the direction towards the end of your fire line, so back on the thread, just through that one single end bead. So when you do that, if you hold on to the tail and you take your beading needle and you slide all the way down, now your beads may move on the thread. But when you do this, and you see how it turned into a little pyramid right there already? Now, it slid up the fire line. You can see how much of a tail is on here now. All that you need to do is you need to take those beads, and if you just grab onto them and hold on and pull with this hand, you can pull that fire line through, just making sure you don't pull them all the way off, making sure you've got your tail, so that's perfect. So right there, if you can see it, there's about an inch to an inch and a half left. Now I was really lucky and my beads automatically turned into this little triangle shape. Sometimes that doesn't happen and you just use your thumbnail and you adjust the beads and you slide them around and tug on the threads so that they do go into that little triangle shape. Now how you secure this at this point in time is just doing a simple slip knot, so taking the end of your fire line thread there and going through, giving that a pull, and so you've got a slip knot so it ties it off. So now that's nice and secure. You don't have to worry too much about doing anything more at that point in time to secure it, because as we go it will get tighter and you don't have to worry as much. So now we've got our little triangle here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do our zigzag stitch. Now how we do that is that you can see that there's 1 bead on the top, 2 on the bottom. We're always going in the opposite direction of the thread. So right now the thread's coming out on the top. That means we're going in the opposite direction and we're going to be going down. So I'll show you the method of the zigzag stitch, and it's quite easy to get the hang of. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick up a single red bead, and like I said, you're going in the opposite direction of your thread, so we're coming out from the top side here, so we're going to go back down, and what we're going to do is we're going to go back down just that 1 bead on the edge here. And so what we're doing is we're creating a zigzag stitch. So let me just pull this tight. You pull your thread all the way, and once you do that, if you give it a little tug, you can see that you're creating what looks like a little bit of a brick wall. And now we've created an upper edge. So there's 4 beads on there, and you can see that on the upper side, the bead is hanging over the edge. Now the thread's coming out the bottom. So the long thread with your needle is coming out of the bottom. And what you're going to do is you're going to again pick up a single bead. But this time we're going in the opposite direction, so we're going up because your thread is coming out from the bottom. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go up that overhanging bead. So going up, And again, we pull on our needle and we pull the thread all the way through. And as we do that, our bead should kind of slide into a brick pattern again. So let me just adjust here. So you can see that we are now creating an uneven amount of beads on the bottom compared to the top. And again, now the thread's coming at the top, so you're going to go back down. So you're going to pick up another bead and go back down through the bead that's overhanging the edge. You're always going into that end bead. So again, let's do this process. We're going to pick up a single bead and we're going to go down this end bead here. And again, you're going to pull your needle through, pull your thread, give a little tug on it. Oops, there goes my beads. Give a little tug on it, and now you can see that we have created another part of our little brick wall. Now don't worry too much if some of your beads, so you can see this one on the end here, it's a little bit loose. Give a little tug, but don't worry about pulling too hard, because the further you get on the dress, the tighter it will get. So I'm going to clean up my beads here and be back in a second. But what we're doing here is we're trying to get to the point where we have 6 beads on top and 7 on the bottom, and that is the 2 rows below the belt. So give me one moment and I will be right back with the next segment. Alright, I'm back. I cleaned up my little pile of beads here, and just to go over this again, we are continuing on with our zigzag pattern until we have 6 beads on the top and 7 beads on the bottom. So I'm going to continue on here until we get to the end of that pattern. So again, I'm going to pick up a single bead. Right now my thread is coming out from the bottom, so that means I'm going back up the top. So I'm going to go through that overhanging bead there. I'm going to pull my thread, pull. Try not to make a mess of my beads again. And now you can see we're wider on the bottom than we are on the top. That's perfect. We are creating our zigzag. So I'm going to fast forward to the next section and show you how to do the belt. Alright, so we can now see that we have 6 delica beads on the top and 7 on the bottom. Now we're ready to do our belt. So if by chance you've done this and say you have it upside down like this and you've got 7 on top and 6 on the bottom, go ahead and flip that. And if you have ended up that your thread is coming out on the bottom, just weave it back up to the top here so you're at the top of where the 6 delica beads are. So we have finished the zigzag stitch, and we do this method to start our dress because then you're starting with 2 rows rather than 1, and it's easier to be able to hold on to. So with that being said, now we're moving on to a brick stitch. Now a brick stitch, you always start it with 2 beads. Every row you start it with 2 beads. So I'm going to show you this method. So I am going to pick up my 2 purple beads. I've decided I'm going to do a purple accent on the dress. So I've picked up 2 beads. Now this is important in doing a brick stitch. If you are going narrower, you are going to go over to the second bridge, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. But if you were going wider, then you would be going to the first bridge. So, not to confuse you, but we are going narrower. So the belt is only 5 beads wide. So what we're going to do is I have my 2 purple beads, and you can use whatever color you want on your belt on your dress. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to secure these beads using a brick stitch. So I'm just going to show you the top view here. These are all of your beads. Sorry if it's a little blurry. But in between the beads where the thread has connected them, we call those bridges or sometimes rainbows. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and we are going to slide our needle through the second bridge. So let me just get a good grip on here. So I'm going to hold this with my thumb and my index. And on the top it's got 1 bridge, and then the second bridge, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my needle underneath and through that bridge. And that's how we're going to secure it. So I'm going to pull this needle through. Sorry if it gets a little blurry here for a second. But as I pull it through, you can see that the beads kind of lay flat there. Now, in order for them to get them to sit side by side, here's the trick when doing a brick stitch. What you're going to do is you're going to take your needle and you're going to go up the bead closest to the center of the dress. And when I say go up, you look at the thread here. The thread's going up this way, and we want to go up through that bead. And because it's sitting on an angle, we know that our beading needle and our thread are going to go up through the bottom of the bead and come out on this side here, and that's the top. So let me just show you, because I know it can get confusing. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our beading needle, and it might help to hold it from a different angle, but I'm just going to show you on the camera here so you can see. What I do is I go up through the back side of the bead, okay? And then when I pull the thread through, I pull up, and you see how it secures that bead back down again? Now the trick to make them lie flat is I'm going to go down through the top of the end bead. So this bead that's closest to the edge of the dress, I'm going down that bead. You'll get the hang of this once you do it a couple times. You know, if you mess this part up and the beads don't lie flat, just try it again. You can pull the thread out, and you don't have to lose the first 2 rows. You can just take off those 2 beads. Okay, to review, what we have done is we've gone through the second bridge. So that was the white thread holding the red beads together. We have gone up through the bottom of this inner purple bead, and it's come out the top. Now we've gone back down the end bead, and it's coming out the bottom. Now in order to secure these beads, what you need to do is you need to go again from the bottom of the inner bead here, coming out the top to secure it. So I will show you. I'm going to slide my beading needle in from the bottom. I'm going to pull all the way to the top. Now you can see that the thread's sticking out the front there. All that you need to do is give it a little pull. You can push that bead down, and once you give it a good little tug on there, it will lie flat. So just to show you, I'm just going to give this a little tug. And fire line, the great thing about it is that it's very sturdy, and this one's a 6-pound fire line, so it's very strong. But you can see I gave a little tug, and now they're laying flat. So just pull, and now they're laying flat on top. Okay? So I know that was a little confusing. Go ahead and rewind if you need to, and come back to this spot to secure your next bead. If you're okay with that method, now what we are going to do is we are going to secure our next purple bead. Now what you need to know when it comes to a brick stitch is that the first beads on the row are always 2, and then after that it's always 1. And I will explain that a little bit further as we get into this dress, but for the purpose of starting the dress, let's just get through the belt and we'll work our way from there. So I'm going to just secure my beading in between my thumb and my index. I'm going to grab my beading needle here again, and what I'm going to do is, like I said, we're going single beads now. So I've picked up a single purple bead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to that next bridge. So that bridge is that thread that connects those 2 red beads. So you can see there, I just slid it underneath that bridge. That's all you need to do. And then you're going to again pull your needle. And here's something to know. If by chance, by accident, you accidentally pull your needle through your thread and you pull down, you're going to end up with a knot. It's easy to fix if you can just loosen that bead back off and slide your needle back through that loop so that it's on the outside. You are good to go. So you can see I've pulled it tight. Now that bead automatically laid down flat, but your thread is coming out from the bottom of that bead. And in order to continue on, you need your thread to be coming out the top of that purple bead. So how you do that is you take your beading needle and you go back up from the bottom and come back out the top. Now, important to know is that if I tried to do that and I accidentally went back through that bridge, this bead will just pop right off, okay? So if that happens, it's not a big deal. Pick up another bead and give it a try. But what you need to do is, oh, I'm sorry for the blurriness here. Let me show you again. You need to go up through the bottom of this bead. So let me do this without losing the camera focus. Bear with me for a second here. All right, now, hold on. Okay, hallelujah, I got it. So now I'm going up from the bottom of that bead and I'm going up to the top, and as I pull on that thread, you will see it will lie flat. Phew! All right, you guys still with me? Let's try the next one. We've got 2 more purple beads to go. So I'm going to grab my beading needle again, and I'm going to pick up a single purple bead. Again, I'm going over to the next bridge, that white thread that's holding those 2 red beads together. I'm going to slide through. And something important to note at this point in time is that I'm pulling my needle towards myself. If you feel more comfortable pushing the needle outwards, away from yourself, feel free. It just depends on how comfortable you are and whichever method you don't poke yourself as much with. If you're an avid beader, you'll know that your fingers usually end up with a lot of holes in them. So whichever one you're more comfortable with. So again, you can see that the thread is coming out from the bottom of that bead and you want it to come out from the top. So we're going to do the same method. We're going to go from the bottom. No, sorry, blurriness here again. You're going to go from the bottom. Let's see if I can focus there. Okay, there you go. You can see I'm going from the bottom of the bead and I'm pulling all the way, and I keep on getting caught around my camera here. And you slide your thread, and again, you've secured another bead. We have 1 more purple bead to go before we finish this belt. All right, let's do this method one more time, and then I will show you how to increase on your dress. Okay, last purple bead. I'm just going to go through this one again. We're going to slide through that bridge on the end there. And don't worry about your extra tail that's still here. You want to keep that on until you get about halfway through your dress so that you don't have it unravel as you're working on it. And you will cut that off later, so don't worry too much about it at all. All right, so I'm going to go from the bottom, and I'm going to go up through that purple bead. And again, I am going to pull it tight. And now we have our first 3 rows of our dress ready to go. So I'll just show you here. We've got our 7 red beads on the bottom, 6 red beads in the middle, and now we have our belt of our dress done. So the next method that I'm going to show you guys is increasing. Now, the method to do this again is the same thing. We're going with a brick stitch. The only thing different is that you are going to be picking up 2 beads and you're going to be putting your needle through the first bridge, not the second bridge. Don't panic, you'll get this after the first couple of tries. So what we're going to do, again, holding your beadwork between your index and your thumb, go ahead and pick up that beading needle again. And again, with a brick stitch, you are always starting with 2 beads on every row. So I'm going to pick up 2 red beads because looking at our dress pattern, you can see that the next rows are red, so following along. So in order to increase, and I'll show you just one moment here, I'm going to show you on this completed pin. So you can see that right now there's the belt, the white belt on this one, and you can see that the beads start to increase, and that's the method that I'm going to show you right now on doing the top part of your dress. So again, I'm just going to pick up my beadwork here and holding it with my thumb and my index. And you can, if you want to, if your tail is in your way, what I like to do is I will grab onto the tail and I will tuck it down in between my middle finger and my ring finger so that I hold it down and it's out of the way, and it just makes it a little bit easier until we're at the point where we can cut it off. So what we do, again, starting with 2 beads, 2 red beads, is that you are going through that single bridge, and this is how you increase on a brick stitch. So pulling through that single bridge on the end where your thread is coming out and pulling tight, and you can see that my bridge pulled up a little bit there, and all that you need to do is loosen off those beads a little bit more, give them a little pull or a tug to tighten that back up again, and go ahead and pull them again. So same method. You can see that your beads kind of want to sit side by side, but because they haven't been secured yet, they're kind of loose. So the same thing that we did when we started our purple belt is we are going to go up the bead closest to the center of the dress. So you can see that the thread's coming out the bottom. So I'm going to go up that red bead. And I'm very proud of myself. I just made that look very easy, so I'm applauding myself here. Now I'm gonna go down this end bead, the one that's on the end of the dress. I'm going to go down just that single bead and pulling my thread again. And the last step in securing your end beads, again, is going back up that bead closest to the center of the dress. All right, so go ahead and pull that tight. And when we do that again, you can use your fingernails if you have them, or just your finger, and you can just kind of push that end bead down. And as you're tugging on it, just give it a little tug, and you can see that it's trying to lay flat. Now you can see a little bit of the thread, but the thing is that once you put the next row on, it will tighten it up, and you don't have to worry about it showing through. So just give it a little bit of a tug. And again, then you're now going to increase only with single beads all the way across. So I am going to fast forward myself here until the end, and I'm going to show you how to increase on the other end. So I'll be right back with the finished row. All right, so I'm going to hop back on here and show you that I have now worked my way to the end of the row, to the point where there's only one bridge left. So I'm going to go ahead and secure this red bead under that last bridge. So again, sliding your needle through, I'm going to pull that nice and tight, and I'm going to go from the bottom of the red bead up. And now this is what I need to show you in order for you to increase your dress on this side. So you can see that it's increased and it's got an overhang on the right side here, but on the left side it hasn't, and there's no bridges left to put your needle into. So the trick in this, in increasing the row, is that you're going to take another single red bead. Let me just grab my beading needle here. And you're going to share that bridge that last red bead is using. So this one's a little tricky as well. Don't get discouraged. Give it a try a couple times. And if it isn't working for you, then take a breather, walk away from the project, and come back to it in a little bit. But if things are going well for you right now, go ahead and give this a try. So what I do is I feel. So right now I've got the tip of the needle, and what I'm doing is I'm sliding it in between that red bead and that purple bead, and I'm feeling for that bridge that this red bead is secured to. So I'll do that again. So I'm taking my needle and I'm feeling my way through, and I can feel that it is caught on the fire line underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my needle through, and what happens is, oh, and I just lucked out. This doesn't happen all the time. Usually the bead will actually just flop up here, and so what you need to do is use your finger and slide it down, and then when you're pulling on the thread, it will sometimes slide itself right next to that red bead that you just attached. So it was kind of a fluke that it happened the first time around. So I'm just going to pull this tight, again holding with my thumb and my index. The thread is coming out from the bottom on that bridge, so I need it to come back up from the bottom of this end red bead, so it's coming out from the top. So I'm going to just hold on to this here. I'm going to grab a hold of my beading needle again, and depending on how comfortable you feel in which way you're using or holding your beading, here, let's do it this way. I'm going to flip the dress around so you can see it on the right hand side here. You can see that this is where the bridge is that I'm sharing. All right, and this is the red bead that I'm securing, so I'm just tugging on it a little bit, making sure it lines up side by side as much as possible. And then what I'm going to do is, picking up my beading needle here, I'm going to go from the bottom of that red bead, and I'm going to go up just the end one, and as I pull tight, it will secure that bead. And now what you have, and I'll just squish that flat there so you can see, now what you have is the increasing row above the belt. So again, following along with the pattern, you will see that the next row up is increasing again. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold your dress in your fingers here, just give a little tug on there. Again, with the brick stitch, you are starting with 2 beads. So we are going to pick up 2 red beads. And then again, the same method as earlier, you're going to share that first bridge. Now I'm going to show you something here. Don't do this. I'm going to show you what happens sometimes. If you put your needle under there and say there's a little bit too much tension and you pull that bead up, all you do is you can put your needle back down on your beading mat or your surface that you're using and go ahead and just pull on the fire line and just re-secure that end bead. Sometimes if you hold on to it with your index and your thumb, it really helps. And again, picking up those 2 beads and starting over again, you can go ahead and go through that first bridge. Now I find holding the beads between my index and my thumb as best as I can, as close to the surface, it's a lot easier to be able to do the beadwork and secure the beads. So going and pulling those beads, again, you will see that they try and bunch up, not laying side by side, but just laying on top. The same method, and let me just focus here again. The bead closest to the center of the dress is the one you're going to go up first. So you're going to go up through that single bead, okay, and pulling on your thread. And again, I'm caught on my camera. And pulling, and you can see how it tries to lay down flat there. That's perfect. And again, with securing the 2 end beads, you are going to go down the end bead and pulling. All right, and last thing for securing this end is going up through that bead closest to the center of the dress. And again, pulling on your thread. And again, if you can see the thread sticking out, you go ahead and just give a little tug on it, and it usually pulls it right in between those 2 beads. And again, don't worry too much if it doesn't secure completely. If it's just a little bit loose, that's fine. With more experience making these dresses, the tighter your dresses will become, and you don't have to worry too much about loose threads. So again, we're going to be doing the same method. We're going to be doing a single bead after this to each bridge. And then when you get to the end bridge, in order to keep on going wider and increasing, you're going to share that last bridge. So again, I'm going to skip ahead until we get to the end, and I'm going to show you one more time how to increase, and then we will continue on with the top of the dress. So we'll be right back. Alright, again, we have come to the end of the row, and we're putting a single red bead through that one last bridge there. So I'm going to slide this through, and I'm going to slide up from the bottom. Oh, get that in focus there. I'm going to slide up through the bottom. Oh, and look at that. Here's a good learning moment. That bead has loosened off again, so I'm just going to tug on the fire line and tighten it back up. And again, I'm just trying to go up from the bottom of that bead to the top. And there we go. I finally got it. Pull it tight. And again, the method that we're using is we are picking up a single red bead, so I'm going to do that. And again, we are feeling in between these 2 end beads, and I'm feeling for that fire line of that bridge. And I'll tuck that tail in behind there. And I've put my needle through those 2 pieces. I'm going to pull, and again, your bead is going to try and lie flat on the end there. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the dress around so you can see it on the right hand side here. And I'm just going to tuck that tail underneath. And you can see that that bead that I was just securing is secured on the end, but the thread is still coming out from the bottom, and we need it to be coming out from the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my beading needle, and I am going to go from the bottom to the top of that single bead. Now continue this on following your pattern, and you are going to go on to 2 more rows, and at that point in time you will be doing the sleeves of your dress. So as you can see on this one here, you're going up 1 row, 2 row, 3 row, and on your 4th row, you will be
Curtis is the go-to guy for all.
Alright, so I've gotten us to the point where we are at the end of the row again, and again we are increasing. So I'm going to pick up a single red bead, and again the same method that we did on the row below, we are going to take our needle and we're going to go back to that bridge that we just used. So in between these 2 red beads, I'm going to feel, and I can feel there that I've gone through the thread, and so I'm going to pull my needle through. And sometimes it takes a little bit of practice to be able to get that through the thread. And again, our thread is coming out from the bottom of that bead and it needs to be coming out from the top. So you can go from this way. I sometimes find it easier if you flip the dress so that you are holding it with the thread on the right hand side. And again, you're going from the bottom of the bead to the top in order to secure it and be able to move on to the next row. So go ahead and do that, and you can see now we've got our 2 bottom rows below the belt. We've got our belt and we've got 2 rows above it. Now taking a look at a finished pin, you can see that there is a belt, and then there are 4 rows, and on that 4th row is when you start your collar of your dress if you want to have one. So I am going to secure the 3rd row up, and then I'm going to start the 4th row, and I will come back once we get to that center bead and I will show you the pattern to continue on. Now if you feel confident and comfortable to continue on your own, you go ahead and do that. You get to the 4th row and just make sure to add on your secondary color, whether you're doing it the same color as your belt or a different color, that's your choice. And you continue on, but just know that when you hit the 5th row up here, you can see we're no longer increasing and widening, we're decreasing. So don't forget, when you do that, you secure your first 2 beads, and instead of going through the first bridge, you're jumping over to the second bridge. So just remember that if you're going to jump ahead, and if you want to continue on with me once we get to this 4th row, go ahead and continue watching here. But if you feel confident enough to continue on and work your way up, you can finish one side of your sleeves of your dress and then weave your needle back over to this side and do the second. And then you go ahead and you flip your dress upside down, taking your needle, and you work your way back down to the bottom of the first 2 rows that you started. And it's the same method again, you're increasing. So you're picking up 2 beads and you're going on the first bridge, and you continue that all the way until you get to the widest point of the dress down here, which happens to be 14 beads wide. And then watching the pattern carefully, you'll see that on some rows it decreases more than 1. So fast forward in the video if you feel confident enough, and you can finish up to that point to see how I continue from there. But if you want to follow along with me still and continue on, at this point in time, I again am just getting to myself to the point where we're adding the first bead of our collar. So I'm going to go ahead and add row number 3 and half of 4, and we will be right back. Alright, so we are now at the point where I have gone up to the 4th row of the dress. I have gone 4 beads in, and this is at the point where if you want to do a collar on your dress, you will add your secondary color. I'm going to stick with purple because I like it. Oh, and I've got a hop-in bead. Alright, so I'm going to take my single purple and I'm going to put it in the center of these beads. And so again, going through that bridge, same method, pulling tight and going up through that single bead. Now, we're at the point here where I'm going to continue. I'm going to add my 4 red beads after that, and then we are going to decrease. So I am going to go ahead and quickly throw these beads on. So I'm just going to go off camera for a second here so I can quickly put these on. So keeping in mind that as you're doing your beading project, if you start to feel frustrated with it, or if things start to go wrong, maybe take a breather, put it down for a little bit. One of my teachings is that if you're starting to get too frustrated with it, your beadwork more than not will pretty much tell you that it is done and you need to take a break. I know when I have had moments where I am working on my beadwork and I'm starting to feel frustrated, then it's just one thing after another that goes wrong, and I know that that is the time to put down the needle, maybe go have a cup of tea, and come back to my project maybe a couple hours later, or sometimes even days later. Or for some of us avid beaders, you know that there are projects we come back to years later because we put them in the closet and forget about them. So now I have gotten to the point where I have my 4 red beads on the one side, my center bead of my collar, and then I've got 4 more red beads. So I'm just going to give a little tug there. Now we are decreasing on our pin. I'll show you again on this completed one. We are at the point where we are going to be decreasing and starting our sleeves. So again, decreasing with the brick stitch pattern method isn't that hard. You need to just remember that you are always starting with 2 beads, just like we have been for all of these rows. I'm going to hold my dress between my index and my thumb, and I like to work from the right to the left, so that's why I always flip my dress around so I'm working from one direction. So I'm going to pick up my 2 red beads, and now just remember, when you're decreasing, instead of just using the first bridge, you're jumping over to the second bridge. So I'm going to go under that bridge, and I'm going to pull my beads, and again, same method of the bead that's closest to the middle of the dress. I am going to go from the bottom to the top. It's loosened off again, so I'm going to go ahead and tug on that thread, and I am going to go from the bottom. And of course it's going to be difficult right when I was on a roll. So there we go. Bottom to the top. Oh, and you can see my little tail got caught in there, so you just slide your needle in there and pull that out. And then again, we are going down the end bead on the very end of the dress here and pulling all the way through. And then you're going to go back up through that one bead that's closest to the center of the dress. And see that? All right, so go ahead and tug on those beads and get them flat. And at this point in time, if you're starting to get tired of your tail, you can go ahead and clip it down. You don't have to clip it all the way down. The trick with fire line, which I found out, is that if you clip it down as close as you can, but you don't have to chance accidentally cutting your beadwork, you can actually use a lighter to just singe the end of it, and it pulls the thread right into your beadwork. So I'm going to cut that little tail off because it's starting to get in my way, and I am going to again grab onto my beadwork. Now, following with the pattern, which again you can find that online at lilreddressproject.ca, you will notice that we are going to be putting on 3 red beads, and then we're going to put on 2 purple beads, and that's the increase in your neckline. So let's go ahead and secure 1 more red bead on here on that next bridge over again, pulling your needle and going up from the bottom to the top, pulling all the way through. All right, so we are at the point where we're going to be doing the collar. So like I said, we're going to be doing 2 purple ones on this row in the center. So what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to pick up a single purple bead, and I'm going to go to that next bridge over, and I am going to be securing that bead. Now I'm going to continue this method again, and I'm going to pick up another purple bead, and that is the second part of the collar. Now it's important to know that after this we're going to be working on 1 sleeve of the dress at a time. So I am just going to quickly off camera here secure these red ones. It's a little easier for me to concentrate on my beadwork without it being right in front of the camera. And by all means, if there's ever a point in this video where you feel like it is being rushed, go ahead and rewind and re-watch one of these sections of the video to get the hang of it. And I will hopefully be walking you through a process that you will be able to replicate and do on your own to make your own beaded red dress pins and bring more awareness to our MMIWG. So here we are at the point where we have the beginnings of our neckline. Now if you look at the completed dress again, you will notice that we are at that point where we are now having a gap in here. So right in between these beads here, we've got this gap, this V happening, and how that happens is that we are now just working on one side of the dress. So if you'll notice that on here, we have just finished this row on the dress that we're working on. Now we're going to be going to the next row. Now notice that we are going to be decreasing again, but we're only working with 3 beads. So keep that in mind. So as we pick up ours, we know that we always have to start with 2 beads. So I'm going to pick up 2 red beads. Again, we're decreasing, so I'm jumping over to the second bridge here. Go ahead and slide those through. And we will secure those ones, again, going up through the bead closest to the center of the dress. Oops, I'm pulling the camera. And then we are going back down the bead closest to the end of the dress and pulling that. And going up that bead closest to the center of the dress again. Alright, so we have secured our beads. You can see that the dress is a little bit curved. That happens when we're first making it before we put our nail polish on the back. So just securing that. Now, it's important to note that we are adding on our secondary color at this point in time. So I'm picking up a single purple bead and I'm jumping over to the next bridge. And again, I'm going to secure that. So pull that tight and you're going to come up through that one purple bead. Pulling, and your end result is the beginning of your sleeve. Now, looking at your pattern, you will see that we are now going to be increasing again on this sleeve. So I'll show you again. We are now going on to the next row up, which is this one here, and we are now increasing again. So just a reminder, that means you're picking up your 2 red beads and you're sharing the first bridge. So let me just pick this up. And again, I like working on the right hand side if I can, but you'll notice because we're working on our sleeves, we are now working from the inner edge of the sleeve. So keeping that in mind, you will now be having to pick up a purple and a red bead to start, or whatever secondary color you are using. So I've picked up a purple bead first and then a red bead. And the reason that I pick up the purple bead first is because we are increasing on this side first. So the tricky thing is to remember is that because we are increasing outwards on the outside of the dress, I am coming from the inside, so I'm jumping over to the second bridge. And so in doing that, I'm ensuring that we are increasing to the outside. If I decided to use the first bridge, so say I was securing the 2 beads and I used the first bridge, our sleeve would continue on this way. It would be going on an increase that way. The reason why we're jumping over to the second bridge to the right is so that it increases to the outside of the dress. So just to reiterate there, I've picked up a purple and a red bead. I'm jumping over to the second bridge from where the thread is coming out, and we're going to the outer part of the dress because we want to increase the sleeve. So with that being said, I'm going to pull that nice and tight, and I'm going to go up through the bead that is in the center. So this is a little bit different than what you were doing earlier. We are looking at the sleeve as the center of the dress. So the bead that's closest to the center, which is the red one, oops, and I just dropped the needle, you're gonna go up through that single red bead, pulling your needle through. You're going to go down the purple bead as if it was the end bead, and it is technically on this side of the sleeve, pulling tight, and then back up through that single red bead from the bottom to the top. And as you pull again, it will secure itself. Now you can see that we still need one more red bead, and because we are increasing to the outer edge, we are going to be sharing that last bridge. So pick up a red bead, and then feeling in between those two red beads, you're going to feel for that bridge. I felt it secure, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it through. And you can see here that it has slid itself side by side between that red bead, or beside it I should say, and now I'm going to go up through that bead that I just put on to secure it. Alright, so you can see here, now don't worry, you can see how these purple beads are not quite sitting flush. They will flatten themselves out. You can even just move them with your nail if you wanted to, and they will push right in. So now you can see that we have an increasing sleeve on the outside, which is exactly what we want. Now your thread is coming out this end bead, so that means we're working from this direction in this time. So we are increasing again, so let's pick up 2 red beads. And we are using the first bridge alone because we are increasing on this edge. So the first bridge, pulling tight. The bead closest to the center of the dress is the one that you're going from the bottom up. I'll just turn this, oops, it loosened off, so I'm gonna pull it tight there again. So we're gonna go up, if I can make this cooperate. Oh, sorry about that. Let's try this again. Trial and error. We're gonna go up through, there we go, up through that center bead, pulling tight, and now down the outer bead, just that single bead, pulling tight again, and then back up that middle center bead, and then now continuing the pattern of the sleeve, we are going to be putting a single purple bead on, or whichever secondary color you are using. So going over to that next bridge and pulling tight, securing that purple bead, and congratulations, you have now completed one side of your dress sleeves. So if you will notice that if you count from the widest point, well, let me flatten this out here for you. I'll grab my beading needle as my pointer. We have now gone from the widest point of the dress, which is right here, and we have gone up our 2 rows decreasing and 2 rows increasing. Now, in order to get your way back over to this edge to continue on your other sleeve, what you need to do is you're going to weave your needle through your beadwork. Now, only do what you're comfortable with. Because I've done this beadwork a few times, I know I can slide my needle through 3 or 4 beads without breaking anything. I would, if you're not comfortable with doing beadwork, only go 1 or 2 beads at a time, so maybe just sliding through the 1 bead. And if you feel resistance, adjust your needle a little bit. You shouldn't feel too much resistance. If you do, that means you might break a bead if you slide your needle through it, so just readjust. It might be that it just got caught in the fire line. So what I'm doing here is I'm weaving my way over to the other edge of the dress to continue the sleeve. So at this point in time, I'm going 1 bead at a time. I'm just weaving up and down through those beads, and then that way you won't see your thread on the outside of your pin. So 1 more to go here. And pull. Perfect. So because I like to work from the right to the left, I'm going to flip my dress around here, and it's your choice on how best you do this. So we will be doing the same method on this side again. So I will be picking up 2 red beads, and you can see that it's decreasing on that side. So again, we're going to be decreasing on this side. So that means when I pick up my 2 red beads, I'm going to be jumping over to the second bridge. And then I'm going to be completing the sleeve the same way that we did the other side. So just to quickly give you a refresher of what we just did, I'm going to pick up the 2 red beads. I'm going to jump over to the second bridge. I'm going to secure those 2 red beads, so pulling tight, going up the inner bead, going down the outer bead, just the 1 bead, pulling tight, back up through the center bead closest to the middle of the dress, pulling nice and tight and securing your bead. Okay, and now we pick up our secondary color, which I have purple, and I'm going to go over to the next bridge, pulling tight and securing. Go ahead and continue on the same way that you did on the other side of the dress, and we are going to again pick up a purple and a red, and now we're increasing out. And once you complete that, you are going to weave your thread the same way that you did on this side over to this side. You're going to weave it all the way back down to this end bead here. So you will end up here, and you just weave your way down through all of these beads the best that you can, down to the bottom bead here, and that's where we will start off again, and I will show you how to finish your dress. Thanks for following. Alright, we are at the point where we have finished our sleeves on the top of our dress, and our thread is now coming out from the bottom of our dress, and it could be coming out from either side. So if you were holding it this way, as long as the thread is coming out from one of the ends, you are doing great. At this point in time, you can go ahead and turn your dress upside down. Again, my method is I prefer to work from the right to the left. So I'm going to hold my dress upside down, and it is as simple as you are going to be increasing on every row for the next, let's count them up here actually. Here's our model dress. So at this point in time, we are, sitting at 2 finished rows on the dress. So 1, 2 on the bottom of the dress. So now we're going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go up the next 5 rows with solid red increasing on each row. Again, a reminder, increasing means you're picking up 2 red beads and just going through the first bridge. So I will give you a quick reminder before we continue on and I go to the next stage of the dress. So I've got the dress here, I'm flipping it upside down. I'm holding mine right to left because that's how I find it easier to bead. I am picking up my 2 red beads because I'm beginning a row, and I'm going through the first bridge. I'm pulling them nice and tight through. You can see that the bead closest to the center of the dress is right there. Again, you're going from the bottom to the top on the inner bead. Oh, and there you go. I just showed you how I went through the bridge and the bead popped right off. So I am back at square one. There is the original right there. I will give this a tug and tighten that back up. And what has happened is I now only have 1 bead on my thread because I accidentally went through that bridge. So let's do this again. Now I've got 2 beads on my needle again. I am going through that bridge. I am pulling my beads tight, and a reminder, if you go back through that bridge, your bead will pop off, so just being mindful of that. And let's see, I won't make my same mistake again. I am going to pull, there we go. So you can see we are increasing again, so we are getting wider. So I went up through the center bead. I'm going to go down through the end bead. And again, going back up through that center bead to secure your row. And And at that, I think you guys are well experienced enough to be able to continue on your own for the next 5 rows. So again, increasing 1 bead, 1 bead, 1 bead, 1 bead, all the way to the end, and then you're going to share that bridge for your last bead that you're putting on. And I will come back to you guys once you have the 5 next red rows completed. Just follow along with your pattern. Alright, so I have gotten to the point where I have increased the bottom of my dress by 5 rows for giving me a total of 7. And if you follow along with the pattern, you can see that there are 7 rows, and then that is when you start the rows with your secondary color. Now some people will use a different color for the bottom of their skirt, and some people won't use a secondary color at all, and you can continue on with red for the rest of the pattern. That is up to you. But what I am going to show you is using the secondary color. So again, flipping my dress upside down, holding it so the thread is on the right hand side. I have my 7 rows of red, and as the pattern shows, for the next row we will be having our secondary color and then our red, and same thing, we are increasing, so you go ahead and use the first bridge, and again securing your beads the same way that you have been this entire time. Securing the center one, the end one, and then the center one again. Now you can continue on with this method. Just remember that when you get to the other side of the skirt, again you're going to be doing your secondary color on the end and 1 more increasing row, and then you're going to be decreasing. And I am going to come back on camera once we get to the point of this row right here. And the reason for that is I am confident that all of you are able to decrease, so you've been increasing up until this point in time, and then you're going to be decreasing, so meaning you're jumping over to the second bridge, and then again to the second bridge. And then when you get to this level right here, when you're jumping over to the third bridge, there's a different method that you need to use. So I'm going to come back onto camera at that row right there. So right now your task is to finish this 8th row, the 9th row, the 10th row, and then get to the 11th row, and once you finish that one, then stop. And I will show you how to go from there. Thank you. Alright, so we are now at the point where we are going to be decreasing but going over a bead. So we've gotten to the point where we have been decreasing and adding in our pattern as we go for the bottom of our skirt, but now we're at the point where when you look at a finished pin or you look at your pattern, you'll notice that the starting bead jumps over 2 beads, so it's a much larger gap than if you were just going over 1 bead. So how we did that is taking your beading needle and taking your dress. So I'm holding it again upside down, my thread on the right hand side because that's how I prefer. My thumb and my index holding the dress. Now this is the tricky part, and you might not get it the first time around. Don't worry, give it a try again. What you're going to do is you're going to jump over to the second bead, and you're going to take your needle and you're going to go down through just that 1 bead. Now go ahead and do that. And now here is the tricky part. When you are taking your needle and you're going to go back up that same bead, and I know you're thinking, well, how the heck's that going to work? Well, what you need to do is you take your needle and you're going to go back up through that bead. What you're going to do is you're going to push that needle towards the back of that bead. And when I did that, I could feel tension on the needle, so I'll pull it out and I'll do this again. So I'm going back up the same bead that the thread's coming out, but what I do is I'm going to push it towards the back of the bead, and what I'm doing is, what I'm looking for is to hook that needle underneath the bridge below, so that when I pull it up, and hopefully it works the first time around, there we go. When I pull on it, it's still coming out of that second bead. So I've managed to secure the thread underneath that bead so that it stays coming out that bead. So again, just a reminder, I won't do it again right now, but what you're doing is sliding your needle underneath and you're pushing towards the back, and that way you hook onto that bridge, and when you pull it up, now it's coming out of the second bead. Now how to create that gap that we saw, if we're following along with the pattern, we are going to be picking up a red bead and then one of our secondary colors. So a red bead and a purple bead for me. Now, same thing, we're decreasing, so we're jumping over to the second bridge from where our thread is coming out. And if you notice, that's the third bridge on this row. And that's how we end up making that gap. So again, just pointing that out, I've picked up my 2 beads and I'm going to the second bridge from where my thread is coming out. So by looking at that, there's 1 bridge, there's 2 bridges, and I'm going to start there. And this is how we end up with that gap. So again, securing our first 2 beads, we're going up through the center bead, down through the end bead, and back up through that inner bead close to the center of the dress. Get that there, make sure to pull it snug, and now our 2 beads are laying flat. Alright, and according to our pattern, then we are now picking up another one of our secondary colors and filling in that next bridge. And you need to remember at this point in time, when you are on this row, let's secure this bead and I'll show you. Looking at our completed pin, I'll just pull that out here. We can see that it is decreased in on this side as well as on this side. So we need to keep that in mind when we're following along with our pattern. So we've got red, 2 secondary colors, then 3 red, 2 secondary, and a red. And again, your next row, making sure you're only decreasing by 1. Finish that row off, and then on the very last row, we're decreasing by 2. And I'll show you that part once we get there. So I'm going to continue on until we get to the very last row and show you how to do that. Alright, my beading friends, we are almost done. So we are on our last row here. So we just completed our second to last row. You notice following the pattern that I had started with 2 red beads, continuing on with 4 of the secondary color, and then 2 red beads. Now we're at the point where we're going to finish our dress off. Again, looking at a completed dress, you will notice that at the very bottom, again, there is a larger gap on either end. So the same method of what I showed you last time. Let me grab my needle here without making a giant mess. Flipping my dress around so I'm on the right hand side. I am needing to get my thread to be coming out of this bead here. Again, going down the next bead over. Let's pull that tight. And again, the same method. I'm taking my needle, and let's focus here, and I'm pushing it towards the back of that red bead. Now let's see if I managed to grip into that rainbow, and I did. So you can see that the thread is now coming out of that secondary bead there. Same method, we are picking up 2 red beads because we are starting a new row. And again, we're going over to either the third bridge, if you want to say it that way, or the second bridge from where the thread is coming out. So 1, 2, 3 bridges, or again, second row from where the thread's coming out, 1, 2. So I'll just show you up here. So we're jumping over to the second bridge from the thread, and let's go underneath that one. Okay, and we are going to secure our beads. I'm just going to go off camera real quick here because it's a lot easier to do it that way. So we are going to secure the bottom red beads, and if you will notice on your pattern, that is 5 red beads. So let's go from there. I've secured the first 2. Now we're going to secure the next 3, doing one at a time. So again, underneath the next bridge, and then going up from the bottom on that bead. Again, picking up another bead. We are going to the 4th red bead, and let's get under that bridge there. Oh, it's because I went underneath the very bottom one. There we go, under that bridge, sliding up. And at any time, if you accidentally pull your needle off, go ahead and rethread it. I can see that the thread's getting short there, so I'm just going to pull that through so I don't pull that off. And you can see that the thread has gotten quite short at the end here. Now, if you are a beginner beader and you prefer to have a little bit of more thread left at the end to work with, feel free on your next dress to cut a little bit longer of a piece. But once you get to the point where you have the method down and you know exactly how much fire line you need and you're comfortable with working with just a little bit left at the end, then the amount that I have on the instructions is exactly what you need in order to finish your dress. And there you have it. We have a finished dress. So you can flatten it out, you can kind of move the beads around. You can see it's quite flexible, but the great thing about Fireline is that it's very durable, and I have washed my red dress pin in the washing machine numerous times, and it has survived. So here we are at this point. Again, I want to show you really quickly, we are going to finish your dress. So your thread is coming out of your end bead here. Now, in order to not have to tie a knot and you have a bulky knot sitting on the outside of your dress, or to have it so that your thread's seen on the outside, what I do is I go back to the second red bead, and it's already secured so it's not going to go anywhere. And then I work my way either down into the edge, or I just work my way back and forth through these end beads, and just making sure that I give a little tug, make it a little snug, and go back and forth. And once, oops, and I got it caught under there. And of course it's tricky when you get to the end here. Let's just use our needle and slide that right off. All right, so we have woven it from one end back to the next. Now it's your choice. If you feel comfortable and you're an avid beader and you can tie a knot on this, by all means feel free to, but you don't have to. The Fireline is quite sturdy, and once you nail polish this, it is quite stiff. So then at this point in time, what I would do is I would grab my scissors and cutting as close as I can, but not to the point where I fear that I'm going to actually cut my beadwork. I just cut it to the point where, let's see, cutting on camera is not easy, guys. All right, so I've cut the last little bit of Fireline off, and you can't even really tell where I cut it off from. Again, if you want to use a lighter to singe a little bit of that end, if you don't cut it close enough, go ahead and feel free. But that is our finished pin. Now, like I said, this is very bendable, and if you were to wear this on a pin back, glue it on like this, it will bend and curl as you wear it. The method that we have found that works the best is to put a coating of clear nail polish on the back of our pins. So it's up to you what kind of clear nail polish you use. The only thing that we do recommend is using a fast drying nail polish, and using only a thin coat to start with. Let it dry and then do a second coat, because if you do a thick coat at the beginning, it will actually seep through to the other side. On this one, you can see that there's just a little bit in the edges, but it actually makes it look quite nice, and it doesn't ruin the look of your pin. But you can see, even with this one, you can see through the beads. It's quite porous. So if you put too much nail polish on there right off the bat, it will seep right through and you'll see the nail polish on both sides. So my recommendation is that it's a fast drying clear nail polish, and you do a thin coat, let it dry completely, and then a second coat. And like we showed you at the beginning, we use E6000 as our crafting glue for securing our pin backs on. If you happen to wash your pin or the pin falls off of your pin back after a lot of wear and tear, feel free to re-glue it with E6000. It's a fantastic glue, and you can peel the old glue off the back of your pin and reattach it. And we just use any kind of pin back that fits on the back of your dress without being longer than the dress itself. So that is our tutorial on how to make a Little Red Dress pin. And again, we would like to thank you for joining us for this tutorial, and to say thank you to the Little Red Dress Project for this initiative, and also to say that we would love for more people to take on this project in your community. The only thing that we ask is, if you are using this pattern and you are creating little red dresses, that you give credit to the project. And if you are making a profit off of making these dresses, we really hope that you are either contributing to the Little Red Dress Project so we can continue funding signage for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, or maybe you have started an initiative in your community, and we would absolutely love to hear more about that. If you want to hit us up on Facebook, on our Instagram, or if you want to see our website, www.littlereddressproject.ca, and you can sign up for our newsletter for updates. So again, thank you so much, and we hope to see your little red dresses.